Class people found it hard to live in the city of Portland. Nobody set a peak when 10,000 African-American families were displaced from inner Northeast between 2000 and 2010. That was progress. Portland Housing Bureau has to get out of City Hall and start talking to people on the street. I've talked to a business owner who has 4 complexes, didn't know that he could sell it to the city of Portland and keep them permanently affordable. We need permanently affordable housing in every neighborhood. And we said we have an emergency. We've had 2 mayors that have declared a housing emergency. But they're doing business, same old, same old. And in fact, they've put more barriers in place to make it harder to actually build really affordable housing. You can only do it well if you're working with the community. Do you agree, sir? Can I ask him a question? Is that okay? Do you agree that we need more housing?
So you're saying that all the buildings that they've got.
I answered your question. Would you mind answering mine?
I guess you did.
Yeah. Yes.
There's nothing we can do about it. It's already in stone.
Well, what I'm saying is I would be happy to find out if those 5 years of permits are at the locations that you're talking about. I can't answer that today because I don't have access to that information right now. But my question for you, do you believe we need more housing?
No.
You don't think we need
more housing?
Really?
I drive all over this town with Uber, and there's hundreds of buildings with for lease signs on them.
Well, but those are houses that people cannot afford to live in.
I understand that.
And what we need is housing that people who work for a living, who go to school, who worship here, can afford.
So suppose you're talking to someone who just moved to this neighborhood and not so long ago moved to this city, and someone who maybe has a little bit of time to hold my city government accountable. And my question is, what's the low-hanging fruit in the accountability department? What should I have my eye on?
I think I get to go first. You went first last time. I think the low-hanging fruit is with me as your city commissioner. I won't require you to come downtown, sit for 2 hours, and get 2 or 3 minutes of public testimony. I will be having meetings out in the community on a regular basis. I've already committed that there'll be at least 1 a quarter in each segment of the city of Portland, and they'll happen in the evening. And you won't be limited to 2 or 3 minutes. We will actually have dialogue and talk about what's working, what isn't working, what we could do better. I think the best thing you can do as a new person to Portland is to read up on its history. Because we have a history of lofty goals and failed promises. And we have a history of believing that we're progressive, and then we look at outcomes and we find out, oops, we missed the boat. I love the fact that you want to hold your elected officials accountable. That is why I decided to run, because I got tired of banging my head against the outside of the door. I think people like you and the folks who showed up tonight are what makes this city strong. And I will tell you that we will not always agree, but we will always be agreeable in our dialogue and trying to find a common solution. I will not stand here and tell you what you would love me to say, which is your neighborhood won't change. Anything will be just fine. Let me tell you, if we do nothing at City Hall, what you're seeing and what you're distressed about will continue to happen because there are no rules today that prevent it from happening. So if you want somebody that's just going to tell you the truth, this is just the way it is, in black and white, I'm willing to work with you to make sure that we get the best outcomes and that we measure the outcomes because, again, the city fails at that over and over and over again.
I think the low-hanging fruit that I can tell you from being a county commissioner for 8 years and passing a $1.8 billion budget over the last 8 years and working on a $1 trillion budget when I worked for Senator Wyden. I was his appropriation person for 10. Look and see where people spend or government spends their one-time only money. Every year for the last 4 years, we've had more revenue. We've had more revenue come in than existing budget. And so you have to identify, you asked the mayor, you asked your city council person, give me a list of all the projects that you spent the one-time only money on. And what you will see that those dollars have been spent on something other than infrastructure or public safety. One of the issues that I'm going to have to tackle as your city commissioner is this issue around the 911 system. I don't know if you all know, that's the bureau that Dan Saltzman has right now, and we've taken over. Right now, there's a 10-second delay if you call 911 before you actually get a live person. And that's a direct result of not having the proper technology to deal with the mobile phone companies. My first order of business will be to find one-time only money, to have technology, so that when you call 911, that someone immediately answers that phone. Thank you.
My name is Jerry Parker. I'm going to change it up a little bit here. Geographical neighborhood associations are identified in the city charter as part of the city's planning process, but they are being pushed aside and replaced with communities of identity that have no organizational requirements and are not required to be open to all as neighborhood associations must be. The Portland Planning and Sustainable Commission has become a stacked deck for developers and other special interests, lacking homeowner representation. Motorists are the primary stakeholder funders for transportation system projects, yet PBOT, citizen and advisory committees are void and non-exclusive of specific motorist representation. Per AAA, the city does not listen to motorists. If elected, how will you ensure that all communities are equitably represented?
I think it's the responsibility of every elected official to reach out into the community and talk to all the communities. One of the things that we are really known for in District 2 at Multnomah County is that we have brought the community into City Hall. The first thing that I did when I was a commissioner in 2011, I had a town hall meeting for African American men and boys. That room was filled, and it filled 300 strong. It was standing room only. Out of that conversation, I heard people say, Commissioner, no one has ever asked us to come down here on a Wednesday night and tell you how you want the resources spent. That's number one. Out of that meeting, I was able to create a program for low-income kids and young people from underserved communities with summer jobs. That program started with 25 kids. We've never had a summer job program at Multnomah County. I have grown that program for 8 years. Now we invest $2.1 million in summer jobs, in summer opportunities. Do you know, it gives me the greatest pleasure every morning when I walk through that door and I see kids that I work with, and it's between the ages of 16 and 24, that they now have graduated from high school and college, and they work for the county. So you have to be very deliberate, you have to be very intentional when you're in city government, and you have to reach out to everybody. You have to make sure that seniors in your community, that they're getting the information that's explained to them properly. This is what we do. We reach out into the senior community by giving pancake breakfast, inviting them to forums, making sure that our most vulnerable residents in Multnomah County and the city of Portland are being helped. You have to demand that as a community. You have to demand that.
The strength, oh, go ahead and clap if you want. Love that. The strength of Portland is its neighborhood system. It has always been it's always been the early warning signal that something was amiss. It has always been the convener to bring people together to advocate for community issues. But all is not well with neighborhood associations. They don't represent all the people in the neighborhood. They don't represent renters much. They don't represent the houseless people. They don't normally represent communities of color. And so what the new Office of Neighborhood Involvement is doing isn't to take away from what you do, it's to add value to what you do. We have to develop creative ways to bring those into the public sphere who are unaccustomed and don't know how to make their voice heard in that process. It's not an either or, it's a yes and.
Good evening, thanks for running. Say, with thousands of units taken offline by Airbnb illegally and the high vacancy rates you mentioned at the high-end units, to what extent do we have a housing crisis, and to what extent is it a governance crisis?
Well, what I'd like to do is to buy some of those luxury units and make them affordable housing, because we have the housing bond money. It's easier for us to buy those units. If we're down, and we're down 25,000 affordable units right now, give or take a few thousand. If we have 20,000 luxury units, what's stopping us from buying those units and making them out of affordable housing? If nobody's staying in them, would you be opposed to that? Well, let me tell you, it's the cost, everything costs. But the issue is we're paying millions of dollars for homeless shelters, for rent assistance, and that's not getting folks into permanent housing. We got people living on our streets who need resources. We're too rich of a community to have people sleeping on our streets. And I keep going back to that because I don't know, it's urgent. It is really urgent that we pay attention to this. We have businesses right now all throughout this city who are planning to leave the city of Portland because of it. We have people who are moving out of the city of Portland into Beaverton and other areas. I had a couple of people come to me the other night and say, look, they don't have the same problems in Beaverton and in Titan. Why can't we get folks off the streets? Because we're not being deliberate. Because we don't have the political will to do that. We are not Mayberry anymore. People are moving here. This is a great city to live and a great city to raise a family in. But we have to deal with our most vulnerable on our streets before we can deal with economic development. You have to understand that this is so important. That's where I'm going to be spending my time. And that's why I think Mayor Wheeler said he wants to open up Wapato and make it out of a mental health and addiction center.
I'm sorry, I forgot, whether we have a housing crisis or a leadership crisis.
Airbnb, big luxury condos, empty.
So the good news is that Airbnb's contract comes up when I'm on the city council next year. In 2019, that contract is up, and we will be reviewing that contract. I've been following the media stories about the fines that Airbnb have been awarded by the city, but the city continues to put them in abeyance, because they're working with them. I have a problem with any company that just comes to town and sets up and doesn't play by the rules. And the fact that the city does not have inspectors that are actually inspecting all the properties on the list is a real problem. The same is also true for Uber and Lyft and these quote-unquote, what do they call them? The scooters, yeah. I think, to answer your question directly, we have had a lack of leadership. It appears that our leadership is reactionary rather than visionary. And I have some ideas about how we can hold accountable people for what they say they're supposed to do. Everything's about accountability. And so if we are just like wink, nod, nod at Airbnb, what we know is there's a year requirement that someone who has an Airbnb property that they have to live in like 10 months out of the year. And the fact that nobody's checking on it, Airbnb knows that. I think it was, we recently did an article with a young blonde girl who's actually in a picture of like 50 Airbnbs, right? And she didn't live in any of them, and she actually lives in Los Angeles. She's a model that they use. That's a problem. And if we have rules, that everyone should follow those rules. And the scooters will be done this month until we do an evaluation and decide what to do.
I agree with you, Loretta, that the homeless situation is the most urgent for Portland.
Step closer, please.
Step closer? Okay. And I support Wapato as well. I want to know, Joanne, do you support Wapato? And also, what would your plan be for addicts and mentally ill who would otherwise choose not to take support?
Thank you for that question. No, I do not support Wapato, and I will tell you why. First off, I want to dispel the myth that 50% of the people on our streets are suffering from mental health issues. That's simply not true.
You can't,
In
because
fact-
I
in
sit at
fact,
the
people-
county.
excuse me,
and we
are
get
you
the
talking
numbers
now?
Every day, and 50%
I'll
of
wait.
the
Okay,
people
hold.
in our jails
Rebuttal.
have mental health.
Hold it. You get some rebuttal. Joanne's got the floor.
Where was I? No, I do not support Wapato. I dismiss the notion that 50% of the people on the street suffer from mental health issues. What the data will show is that people have houses, suffer from the same alcohol and drug addictions and mental health issues as people who don't have houses. It is a way to other people who are in crisis, and I absolutely reject that notion. Now, why do I not support Wapato? The government no longer owns it. Mr. Snitzer, Jordan Snitzer owns it. He paid a tiny bit of money for it, right? And what he would like is for the county and the city to give him $5 million to renovate it and give him $5 to $7 million a year to run it. I absolutely oppose that. We have excellent community programs that work with people to get them what they need and to get them into employment and housing that's affordable to live in. I would never give a rich man $5 million to do something he has no expertise in doing. And if he's going to subcontract it, why don't we just eliminate the middleman, right? So no, I do not support Wapato. I support getting people off the street, absolutely. I'm on the Board of Human Solutions, and we have a women's shelter and a family shelter. I can tell you the shelters are inhumane because the way the county does it is you line them up at 7, you give them a hot meal, you put them on a cot, you open the door at 6 a.m., and you kick them out on the street. That is inhumane. We need permanent housing that people can afford to live in. Some people cannot live independently, and for those people, we need to build housing with services attached. If we ask for help, I've asked for help all over Portland from people, and we have some really smart people who live here, that we ask them for help to help us. And they won't be helping us by saying, give me $5 million and let me find somebody that knows what they're doing that I can hire to do it.
Okay, so facts. Multnomah County, we do all the transitional housing. We contract out to private contractors like Human Solutions, like Transitional Projects. Jordan Snitzer is not going to run this program. He's going to put transition projects in there, and they're going to run their program. It is very clear to me that we have a building that you all paid $100 million for. Jordan Snitzer wants to put it back into the public use. We could put 1,000 people in Wapato tomorrow. It is a beautiful, pristine building that sits on 18 acres of land. And for those people who want to camp, they can camp out on Wapato. This is not rocket science here. We have the money in our budget right now to open up Wapato. That's why Mayor Wheeler is talking about making it out of a addiction and mental health. I know, I have the data. I get the numbers every morning about who's in our jails. She doesn't. I'm a sitting county commissioner. I can show you the data. People on the streets right now, they have mental health issues. We need to deal with that.
Hello, everybody. I'm Maureen Harrison. My question takes a different twist. One of you will be seated at a table that has been dominated by male over the past years and years and years. In the U.S. in the Senate, there are 21 states who has never had a woman in the Senate. The number of elected officials are 25% women politicians. I believe someone said they had been in office, sitting in office for, I believe, 10 or 8 years. Well, whichever of you have been sitting in an office, political office, for a long period of time, I would like to know, what have you done to prepare women, other women, to take that 25% bar up and to be at the table?
I can answer that first. When I got into office in 2010, I was the second African American in the history of Multnomah County to sit on.
But the question was, what have you done?
Let me explain this to you. I was the second, and I found that unconscionable. So I said, what are you going to do about this? Because in this day and age, being the second it seems so unreal. So I started having a lunch. It'll be my 6th year, starting in January. It's a Dr. Martin Luther King Women's Equity Lunch, where we try to inspire women. We bring in African American elected officials from around the country to give a talk to young women, women who are already in professional positions, to try to encourage them and inspire them. The other piece is how I try to encourage young people in my summer jobs program. I'm the only commissioner that runs a program out of their office. When I have people come into my office and understand what the issues are, giving them access to public service, that's what we do in my summer jobs program. We pay for 650 kids between the ages of 16 and 24. So that's what I've done over the last 8 years.
And the key word is prepare.
Yep.
I will say, when I was a legislator in my freshman class, I was the only female in a 16-member freshman class. I looked around and went, whoa, where am I? Oh, my mic is here. Why am I talking? There it is. Whoa, where am I? Since then, I have run a lot of leadership development programs. I actually have a training that I used to do at the Western State Center for their organizer training, from grassroots leader to elected official. And I did that for several years to actually make the idea palpable to people that they should step up and run for public office. The biggest reason why women self-select out is money, which is why I've always supported campaign finance limits and other opportunities to publicly finance campaigns so that regular people could run and serve. When I first decided to run, somebody told me I needed $250,000 just to compete. And I knew I would never, ever, ever have as much money as some of my opponents, but I knew I had something they didn't have, people. And so I had a strong base of supporters, and I think anybody who has a strong base of supporters and can make the case for why they should run and serve in public office should have the opportunity to do so. It is a privilege to serve in public office, and it shouldn't be limited to white men.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you both for coming. I've worked in and with government for over 25 years, and I've had some wonderful experiences where things worked very well together. So I'm gonna, like the woman behind me, want a specific example of when you have worked with government and brought all the other resources that are available, not just city, state, federal funding, but Jordan Smithers to me is a wonderful opportunity of a wealthy man who has a passion, who also wants to work with transition housing. We need to hold that accountable, the vision, but please give me both an example of when you have been intricately involved with bringing all aspects of the community and the resources that are here to build something together so it's not so government dependent.
Thank you for that question. When I came to office, I had the Coalition of Color come to my office and they said, Commissioner, our children are not graduating from high school. But when they work with our programs like Latino Network, NEA, SEI, IRCO, kids graduate at a higher rate. I said, well, that's simple. We just need to identify additional resources for you so that you can bring more children and families into your program. And so we did that at Multnomah County. And thinking about how do we sustain this, I looked to the federal government, where I worked for 21 years. And I identified a program called the Promise Neighborhood. And I gave myself 3 years to work with this coalition to put in a RFP so that Portland could have a Promise Neighborhood. Now, Portland would be the first in Oregon to receive it. And that would give them $28 million if it was funded. This is our 3rd year. We were just approved last month for the Promise Neighborhood. I helped to bring in $28 million with the Promise Neighborhood funds from the federal government. Now those 4 programs will be able to serve more families. More families will have more children graduating from high school, because the last thing that we want to do is have additional people on our city streets. We do and will have a labor shortage. Baby boomers are retiring at the rate of 10,000 a day for the next 17 years. So we have to train the future, and the future are the young people in our community. And where you're going to get the most bang for your buck are young people from underserved communities who have not historically worked into public service. So I've worked on this. I have the patience. I have the effectiveness. I have a track record and a background at working on the local, the state, and the federal level. I will continue to do that and continue to identify resources so that we can be a better city. Thank you.
Sometimes it takes the community to push government to do the right thing. And my example, my specific example, is the Portland Clean Energy Fund initiative that you all will have an opportunity to vote on when you make your election decisions this year. That initiative could have just been passed because it was the right thing to do. It targeted the right people. However, we had a government that didn't want to tell business owners that they may have to pay a little bit more to do business in the city of Portland. I built the coalition that included the NAACP Portland branch, NAYA, the Native American Youth and Adult Association, Verde, which works primarily with the Latino population, Alpano, Asian Pacific Islander Network of Oregon, Sierra Club, and 350 PDX. We worked for 2.5 years to build this initiative, getting buy-in from people who had never, ever proactively developed, collected 66,000 signatures, and actually make the ballot that's a positive measure that will have a huge impact on low-income people and communities of color. $30 to $35 million annually invested in clean energy and low-income communities, and creating a workforce that will be women and people of color and low-income people and more students who don't see a path to college at all.
Oh, I want to hear that. Go make it 30 seconds. I got 30 seconds.
I'm good.
We have time for just one more question.
If you cut yours in half, you can get the other half. They're negotiating. You can make your question longer so you can include this.
I've been following the Just Energy Fund progress through its various names.
Close it in, Mike.
So delighted that it's something that you support. And I wonder how you think it might also impact homelessness, houselessness, in terms of maybe prevention. If you could address that.
Thank you. That's an interesting question. I think one of the things it will do is provide opportunities for people who are houseless to get new job skills. There's certainly a component of it that has farming attached to it. So we could be creative. I've asked Mayor Wheeler to put the Portland Clean Energy Fund in my portfolio when I get to City Hall, because I will make sure that it's implemented as we envision. We have too many good ideas that the devil's in the details about how you make it happen on the ground. And I know a lot about what's failed with the Energy Trust of Oregon and who benefits, and certainly not low-income people or communities of color. And so I will make sure that is implemented as we intended. And of course, we have a oversight body involved in monitoring the proposals that we fund. And I will be actually showing up on work sites, making sure that the people who we say are on the work sites really are those people.
I think it's so important to give a workforce opportunities, particularly a workforce of color and low-income folks, to go into a green energy opportunity. I know that we're going to have a lot of opportunity on the public sector as well. Understanding that we're going to have a labor shortage, as many of these opportunities that we can push through is going to be excellent. But what I do know is that we have 30,000 young people right now between the ages of 16 and 24 who are not working and who are not in school. We have to afford them an opportunity to get some education and training, because if we don't, they're going to be in our homeless shelters, they're going to be in our jails, and they're going to be in our hospitals. So I support this. I think it's important and it's critical to making sure that we are truly a city that works.
I'm sorry, is there a closing statement? Well, we're over time.
We're over time.
And I do want to
What do you think?
I want to be respectful of the auditor candidates because they can, 1 minute?
1 minute, closing statement.
All right. Since I open, Ms. Smith, would you like to close first?
Yes, thank you. As you've heard earlier, when I look at the city of Portland, I look at it through 5 generations of the Smith family. I look at it through my 21 years of public service. And some people say, you know, that was great that you had an opportunity to learn from Senator Wyden. But my first eyes of serving came from my mom. I watched my mom serve the Head Start children. And I watched my grandmother serve people in the community with vegetables on Saturdays. That's where I had an opportunity to know that it's important to serve and that you have to listen to people. You will get someone who will be a new front door, who will have lived experiences that will be important to making sure that everybody in this community, that they have an opportunity to have an opportunity. We have unprecedented prosperity here in Portland. That's proven by the number of people who come here. I want to be your next Portland City Council. Vote for Loretta Smith for a new front door.
I am a vet, a former legislator, a small business owner. I ran a nonprofit. I've done just about every job you can imagine. But let me tell you, there's a difference between a politician and a public servant. A public servant does the work because it has to be done. And they do it whether there's a title, whether there's pay. Most of what I'm known for in Portland, I did for free. And I didn't do it because I had a title or a position. I did it because somebody had to step up. People talk about this open seat. It wasn't open before I opened it. When I went and met with Dan Salzman and said, I'm running against you, 2.5 years later, he decided to retire. I'm not doing this because I was looking for a job. Certainly don't need this job. I'm doing it because somebody's got to. Joanne Honesty, Portland City Council. Thank you.
Great presentations. Thank you very much. Now, we have the auditors to come up here and debate. If we have them both in the audience, which I think we do, Jennifer McGurk and Scott Lurie, please come up and join us. Yes, we've got Jennifer first, and Scott, and then I will do the first question.
Hi everyone, it's really great to be here with you this evening.
Hello, Jennifer.
Hello. I live in Roseway, so not too far away from here, and my kids go to Rose City Park School, which is an elementary school again this year. I'm running for Multnomah County Auditor. I'm a performance auditor, and when I tell people that, they typically a glazed look comes over their face, and they ask me what that is. So we spend our days digging for facts to make sure that government is operating in a way that's accountable to you, and to push for programs to be more effective so that we get better outcomes with your tax dollars. I love doing it. And when I think about where my love for the facts comes from, for this digging for information, I think of my dad. He was a geologist for the federal government for about 35 years. And he decided to work for the federal government because he wanted to provide unbiased information about our planet to the public. I remember being 8 years old and going with him to his lab and holding samples of sediment, and him talking to me about how those pieces of earth would help tell the story of how glaciers came to be, how the riverbeds and mountain ranges that we know here in the Pacific Northwest came to be. He taught me that facts matter for making good public policy, especially now when the very notion of fact seems to be a question. We're fortunate that here in Multnomah County, we have a strong tradition of auditing. Part of that tradition is that the elected auditor gets to decide where we're going to dig deep and where we're going to pay attention. It's a great responsibility to our community. And I think it means we need to be looking at those programs that directly affect people's health and safety. Let me give you an example of what I'll be looking at. In 2015, an internal audit was done in the sheriff's office that found disproportionate use of force against people of color in our jails. Disability Rights Oregon has published 2 reports about deplorable conditions in our jails for people with mental health issues. In one instance, a man who was in a mental health crisis pulled out one of his own teeth after being held in isolation without access to health care. How do we prevent these things happening? How do we stand up for the most vulnerable among us? Auditing, believe it or not, is how I stand up. Investigating what's going on in programs, finding out what's happening from the people receiving services and the people who are providing the services, finding out what's happening with our tax dollars, and then reporting back to you is how I stand up. And I hope that you will decide that one way you stand up is by voting for me, Jennifer McGurk. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Scott Byrne and I'm running for Multnomah County Auditor for 3 reasons. Reason number 1, and I'm glad Jennifer laid out some of what performance auditors do, because I have seen as a state auditor the power of performance audits to improve government. And I'm talking about programs for the most vulnerable people among us. So some of the audits I've worked on include temporary assistance for needy families, which is the welfare system. That led to helping contribute to a big revamp of the welfare system to get services to more vulnerable people. I've worked on audits of alternative schools, which were really off the radar screen, and I think we're helping put their poor performance back on the radar screen. Worked on the audit of foster care that you may have seen recently, which was another audit that just, really, I think, raised the issue of we as a state are not following through for these kids. So that was really, really incredible to work on. And right now I'm working on an audit of Oregon Department of Education and public schools that's focused a lot on how these entities are doing for the kids in high poverty schools, the most vulnerable kids in our state and our community. That's the approach I value most, and that's the approach I want to bring to Multnomah County. The second reason I'm running is that Multnomah County, for the last 10 years, the auditor's office has not focused on the programs that matter most for vulnerable people. So we're talking mental health care, physical health care, the criminal justice system, the DA's office, the jails, the sheriff, probation and parole. These are huge services and they haven't gotten near enough attention from the auditor's office. And the third and final reason I'm running is I think I have the experience to come in and help the office reorient toward that approach and deliver results. I mentioned my work at the state auditor's office, and I think I've shown that there. Before I was a state auditor, I was an in-depth investigative reporter for 23 years, including 17 years at the Oregonian. And that's where I sort of got to know Multnomah County and really developed a love for this place, as well as a lot of sources and the ability to dig deep into community problems. And before that, I was a financial auditor for Pricewaterhouse in San Francisco. At that point, I had a CPA. So that level of experience, I think, is why I've received endorsements from all 5 of the former county auditors, including the Fort Wayne Public Office, and also why I've been endorsed by Atlantic Week, the Oregonian, and the Tribunes. So I hope you'll learn a lot more about performance auditing during this discussion tonight. We'll be able to answer some of your questions. And I'm looking forward to this a lot because you seem like quite a smart crowd, and I think we're going to get some good ideas about performance audits that are making. Thank you.
So on behalf